Hi there and welcome to the Memento Holder Project. I am Trisha Morris from Club Scrap. I know a lot of you have already probably purchased your Craft Along kit. If you haven't, it's not too late. Once you see how fun this project is to make, you might be inspired to make one for yourself. Let's go ahead and get started. Now, the first thing we usually begin with for almost all Club Scrap projects is our really nice guillotine style trimmer. These are not expensive. I can't recommend this model enough. It's very, very sturdy and gets the job done. And I'm also using our innovative Accordion pocket file. Basically, this just allows us to use our vertical space to stay organized while we trim all kinds of different pieces for our project. Now this lip just fits right underneath my trimmer base and then holds it up vertically so that I can really make use of this space that I have a lot of. And if you don't happen to have one of these, no worries, just keep 4 separate piles for all the pieces we're going to be trimming. Now we, as I mentioned, are going to be using one of our page kits, and you can substitute any Club Scrap page kit for this project. And maybe you've already gone ahead and done this. You've taken maybe just the papers out of the kit and you can see all the wonderful embellishments that are still there ready for us to decorate. I'm going to leave those in the bag and set that bag aside. And as is our norm, I'm going to prepare all of these papers in the order they're going to be trimmed so that we can avoid errors later on. So the first piece we want to find from our kit is going to be this purple, and I'll just pile this up on my trimmer base. And I like to choose the paper by looking at it from the top, so that just kind of is an easier way to grab it. And then I want you to find one pink sheet. Make sure you just have one. It's a heavier paper, so be ready for that. Then one green and one yellow. And a lot of times I trim the printed papers last because those are harder to replace, but you probably have a stash of some of these colors. If in case something goes wrong, you can still replace it. So that was purple, pink, green, yellow. Then we're going to trim another pink in a different way. Then I'm going to use this white print here that has the flowers, the larger flowers in the lower corner, and I'm just going to put that face down. Next, you can find what we're calling the collage print. This is just a big collage of items. The other white print. Then the yellow. Isn't that pretty? It's such a pretty color. Then purple. Goes faster once you have fewer papers to choose from. Then a green. And finally, the collage print. Now in your kit, you also have been given a sheet of white folding board, so don't get this mixed up with your white plain. You'll see a little bit of a fleck into it, and it's just a lot heavier than your other pieces. Now you still will have 2 sheets of what we call cut aparts left over, and these can be separated and trimmed out according to the visual space in between each piece. And before you trim these, you'll just want to remove the outer perimeter to create a perfect 12 by 12. Okay, so now we have this whole stack of sorted paper. Let's flip that back over to the right side where the purple should be on the top. And now I'm going to check the grain direction of this purple plain sheet. To do that, hold it by an edge, and you want to study the behavior of the paper. How stiff or droopy is it? And this, it looks pretty droopy to me. I don't know, but I'm going to compare. So I'm going to hold it by this other edge, and I can see that the paper is very stiff. Hold it by this edge, it's very flexible, and I want the paper to flex from top to bottom when I put it into my trimmer. I want to do the same thing with the pink. That's very stiff. It's very droopy, so I want it drooping from top to bottom. And I'm going to stack those 2 and trim them at the same time. This is a nice, easy cut at 9 inches. Now this is going to grow up to become an inside page of our book, so all I'm going to do is just set that aside. And then we have these long strips, and these are used for decorating our book, so I'm going to put these in pocket D for decorating. Okay, now I'm going to take the green, find the grain, and have it dip top to bottom again. Take the yellow, grain is dipping top to bottom, and again I will trim at 9 inches. Set these 2 pieces aside to be scored, and once again file the strips in pocket D for later. Next, we're going to do something a little bit different with our pink. Now this, you don't have to worry about grain direction. We're not going to be folding the paper. The only time I'm concerned about grain is if we're going to be folding. And then we're going to take this white print and make some panels out of it. Let's see, I'm not really sure how I want to do this. I guess it doesn't really even matter. So I'll just pop it in my trimmer. Maybe I'll turn it like this way. Okay, so let's go ahead and cut this one at 8 3/4. We're cutting both at the same time. Then I'm going to rotate and we'll cut at 11 1/2 and 5 3/4. Okay, so I have some nice florals on each of my panels here and the pinks. We're going to stack up the 4 pieces that are the same and pop those in pocket A. There's going to be a little scrap here you can put in pocket D along with these other longer strips for more decorating. Okay, now I'm moving on to page 2 of the instructions. If you purchase the Craft Along kit in advance, you have access to those instructions already. Otherwise, you can find them on our blog post about today's project. Next, we're going to take this collage print and find the grain direction so it dips from left to right. And I'm also going to take this other white print and same thing, I want it dipping left to right. Now, before we were doing it this way, now we're going to do it this way. Okay, and trim this at 11 1/2 and 8 3/4, 8 3/4. Then rotate and trim at 11 1/2 again. And 5 3/4. Okay, so gather up all of those panels and put them in pocket A with the others. There were 2 shorter little scraps you can add to pocket D. And then now on these longer strips, these are 2 3/4 by 12. We're going to cut them at 9 inches. And I'm going to set these 2 pieces aside to be scored. And then these little squares can go in pocket D along with more of these strips. I love decorating with the strips though, so don't throw those away. Let's do that one more time with the yellow. I know it's a lot of trimming, so bear with me. But you know, if I teach you how to do these steps, you can make more of these on your own with ease. Okay, so let's cut this one, the yellow and the purple at the same time at 11 1/2 and then 8 3/4. Now rotate. This larger piece we'll cut again at 11 1/2 and 5 3/4. And stack these all up. They're all going to go in pocket A again. And we have some more scraps we can put in D. And then the strip here we'll cut at 9. Set these pieces aside to be scored. And then the squares and then the strips can also be added to D. Now, if I'm going way too fast for you, try not to worry. Just kind of sit back, grab a cup of coffee, watch this all go down, and then you can make this for yourself at your very own pace once you see how beautifully it comes together. On the green, I'm going to trim at 9. And then rotate the 9-inch piece and cut at 11, 5 3/4. Now here, rotate the 5 3/4 and cut at 8 3/4. All right, this is going to go in pocket A. This gets set aside to be scored. We have a scrap. This really can be a scrap. That's for this little one. And this one can go in pocket D if you like. And then this also can go in pocket D. Okay, we have a collage print now. We're getting there. Almost done with the trimming. Bear with me. We're going to cut this one at 8 3/4. Rotate and cut at 8 1/4. A lot of 8 1/4 today. And 4 1/2. And then rotate this 4 1/2 and trim at 6 1/2. That makes a little photo mat. We're going to put that in pocket C. This guy in D, nothing gets disposed of until we're sure. These two can be placed in C and this in D. Okay, that wasn't so bad. Now we have our folding board. So I saved this until last. This is a nice heavier stock here. And we are going to trim this at 10 1/4 and your trimmer will handle it just fine. 10 1/4, 9, then rotate and cut at 6. Now these are going to be the covers of your book. And we'll put both of these in pocket C. Then you have a piece that is 1 1/4. So they got mixed up. Make sure you grab the 1 1/4 inch piece and cut at 9. That will be the spine of your book going in pocket B. And these other remaining pieces, the smaller one can be a scrap, like just you dispose of, and the other one in pocket D, just in case you want to use it. And so scrap wise, we have almost nothing left over after all of that trimming. And I'm going to swap out my trimmer for a score pal. Now this green piece that you trimmed, or whatever one you're trimming, if you're doing a different kit, is 5 1/4 by 9 right now. I'm going to score this at 2, and then 3 1/4. Now when we trim this, we paid attention so that we were also trimming with the grain. When we make these narrow folds, it's going to work out beautifully. I want you to put that in pocket B. That's the spine of our book. And then you have all of these narrow strips. This is going to be scored at a weird measurement. Now this measurement is created to accommodate the size of the flap on our envelope that we provided in the Craft Along workshop. So just be mindful of that. The number you're looking for here, and bear with me, is 1 3/8. So what I like about this particular model of the score pal, it's the score pal eighths. Here's 1 1/8, 1 2/8, 1 3/8. Okay, so just count 3 notches. If you don't have a score pal with the eighths, you'll have to maybe use a ruler to mark that measurement and then line up the measurement with the score pal. So that's 1 3/8 on all of these. And if you're working with the print, make sure the print is facing up. Okay, now these pieces can go into pocket A. Lastly, we have the inside pages for our book. Now, scoring these pages is optional. If you want to score, they just get scored in half at 6 inches, and then make sure when you fold them in half that the bump of the score line goes on the inside of the fold. I like to use my score pal as a jig to help me line up the edges of the paper nice and neat. Sometimes I see people folding paper and they don't get the edges lined up very nicely, and then just the overall aesthetic of the book is lessened by a crooked fold. So it's like building the foundation of your house, right? So I'll fold all of these in half. These are not scoring, and the reason I can still fold beautifully, even though the papers haven't been scored, is because we're folding with the grain. Now what I like to do, and this saves a lot of time, is just stack up my folded pieces and then run them over with a bone folder all at once on each side. And that way I only had to burnish twice for 4 pieces of paper rather than each time on each side. Okay, with these all folded, I'm just going to set them aside, not in a pocket or anything. And I'm going to grab those envelopes that came in your project kit if you happen to get that in advance. Otherwise, remember, you can still pick that up. I'm going to fold down the flap of each of these envelopes and just give it a nice little crease. And there should be 4 of them. The finished size of the envelope, once the flap is closed, is going to be a 9 by 12. Okay, then in pocket A, you have a series, or pile A, if you've been keeping piles. We have all these pieces that we scored, and we need to fold them in half like a hot dog. And luckily, when we trimmed these papers, we trimmed in consideration of the grain needing to be folded, the paper needed to be folded in this direction. So that really does help us by planning ahead, and that's what we do at Club Scrap. All of our projects have a lot of planning that goes into them, and I'm going to do that same trick with the burnish. So stack them up and give it a nice crisp crease. Now, this is a tool I use a lot. If you happen to have a corner chomper, I like to use this on the 1/2 inch setting. And I want you to be aware here that I'm going to round the corners, but I'm going to do the corners that have the fold in them. Okay, so this is an option, but this is on the folded edge only on the 1/2 inch setting. So on the side, you can see 1/2 inch here, and that's the corner I put in. And so I'm rounding the folded edge corner of each of these pieces. Okay, so now these end up being decorative flaps for our envelope because it really just kind of jazzes things up a little bit. I found the best way to do this is just slide the flap cover onto the flap and line up the edges, you know, on the top and bottom edges or sides. Open it, and then you can add some adhesive to the straight edge of one side of the flap, and then close it back over. Then just open the flap all the way, open the flap cover, and then apply adhesive on the other side. If you put adhesive on both sides of the flap at the same time, it's just a little bit more challenging to get that to attach. So you can go ahead and repeat that process for all 4 of your envelopes. And remember, just put the flap in, line it up on the edge to edge, center it if it's not perfect, add your adhesive, and close. Isn't that pretty? And then open this up, apply your adhesive, and close. How nice. 2 more to go. Now, if I don't do a little bit more planning, I won't be able to use the clasp. I have to make way for the clasp, right? I found also the easiest way to do that is just open the clasp so that it comes to a point at the center of the clasp, and then close the flap enough to where you can make an indentation right at the point of the clasp. Then if you happen to have a hole punch, you can use any kind of a 1/4 inch hole punch, or if you have a crocodile punch, that works too. The hole is a little bit small for what's needed, so I just kind of forced it in there, and now the envelope can close nicely. So again, just open the prong, press the prong onto the flap, use a punch to make way for your prong, and then force it through to make that work. And repeat that for those remaining 2 envelopes. The next thing you can do is take each envelope and fold it in half with the prongs on the inside. I'm going to add a cutting mat here so that you don't have to look at white envelopes on my white tabletop here. That's not ideal. And then I'll do my little group of burnishing session. That works out great. Now at this point, each envelope can be opened again, and you want to have the flap of the envelope, I would say, on the left, just so that we're all consistently working together. Now in pocket A, you have a huge assortment of panels, and all of these panels are the same size. They're designed to fit or nest perfectly onto the envelopes, and they can be a nice way to decorate them and add a little bit of color and flair. You can choose any color that happens to be in the folder. I'm going to go with this really kind of crazy collage pattern, maybe a solid green, a solid pink, and maybe a solid yellow. There's no, you can just do anything you want. It's totally up to you. Now on this piece that already has the pattern on the left, I'm going to glue a solid to the right side of this. So you have 2 ways you can apply your adhesive. Number 1 is you can use any kind of a dry 2-way adhesive, but the important thing is that you apply adhesive to the entire perimeter. You can add some in the middle too, but the perimeter is important, and that's all I'm going to do is just the perimeter and nest it onto the right side with the flap on the left. Then I'm going to come in with this one, and I'm going to show you the other way, and that is with our bookbinding glue that I usually keep in a needle tip applicator. You just need to have it going along the perimeter. If you want, you can add a little in the middle too, but the edges are very important. So I'm just centering that into that space, and it should fit perfectly. I think that the bookbinding glue in the needle tip applicator is probably the most economical way to do it, because the liquid adhesive goes a long way, and it's inexpensive compared to some of the tape runners that are out there. Plus, it's very permanent. Once this cures, it's not going anywhere. And then I'll just finish with the last envelope. Okay, how are your measuring skills? I have a ruler here, and I'm going to grab a pencil, and I want you to measure 4 inches down from the right edge of this matted area. If you want, you can even use your cutting mat to find that 4-inch mark. So this is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Every line on the grid makes a 1/2 inch, so that's nice and easy. And I'm going to go ahead and make a little mark here as well. Then, if you want, you can use your first envelope as a template so that you really only measure once. And normally you would say measure twice, cut once, but this is just measure once, and you'll have a template. So I'm just making a little tick mark with my pencil along the right edge of the envelope here, 4 inches down from the top, and then at the crease of the fold so I can see it better. And then I need to grab my trimmer again. With the trimmer here, I'm going to take my envelope and slide it in there so that that mark right at the crease is lined up with the blade. And then the other mark that I made 4 inches down is also lined up with the blade. So just kind of tweak things to where it needs to be and slice. So I just took off a corner. Now if you flip it around, and here's a little trick for you. If you take the needle tip applicator and you just add a little bit of glue in the seam of that triangular shape, and then slide it onto the right bottom corner of the envelope, I now have pocket number 1 up here, pocket number 2 here, and pocket number 3 here. And then it's decorated on this side. Isn't that clever? Okay, so obviously you're gonna hear me saying this a lot. You're gonna repeat that on the other side. So here I am at the top. Yep. And again, if you want, you can add a little adhesive, just a little bit is all it takes on the seam before you slip it on to the corner. And then finish it off with the remaining 2. And now I'm done with that trimmer. Anytime you stitch a book and you have a set that's stitched in at the same time, that's known as a signature. So you remember those pieces of paper we folded earlier? We're going to nestle one folded piece inside each envelope. So I think I'm gonna like the pink there, and you can do this however you want. I'll put the green in this one. And I'm going to put some yellow in this one because I already got purple and green showing. I love all these bright, happy colors. And this one gets purple. That worked out perfectly. Perfectly purple. So now these are the 4 signatures of my book, and they're all ready to prepare for stitching. Now, don't let the word stitching scare you. I do have a couple of tips. Now, on the last page of the instructions, there is a template that you can use to help us prepare for stitching. Now I'm just going to fold the edge of my instructions over nice and neat along that line. It doesn't matter the size of this template, it just tells us where our holes get stitched or get punched. And I actually have a little tool. It's a piercing cradle. I make these myself here at Club Scrap because it's just so handy, and it was kind of a hard gadget for me to figure out. And when I finally did, I realized other people wanted them too. So we have them. They're handmade here, and they work great for helping us pierce our stitching holes. So this is how it works. Take one signature and put it down into the valley of our stitching cradle, and I'll give you an alternative if you don't have one. Then the template goes in, and you want to line up where it says top edge and bottom edge. You want to line that up in the valley with your page. And then there are 3 other lines, 1, 2, 3, not top edge or bottom edge, but the other 3 lines in between. That's where we bring the tip of our paper piercing tool, otherwise known as an awl, an AWL awl. And I'm just piercing down all the way through to make sure, and look at how those holes are directly in the fold. I think that's probably the most important part about stitching, is getting the hole into directly into that fold line, and that's what makes the stitching a lot easier. Now, if you don't have a stitching cradle, I want to give you an option. This is just a regular piece of cork board, and you can use a mouse pad. You can be innovative. It doesn't, I mean, I'm sure you can find something around the house to help you out. And then again, you just line up the template. And this time though, you have to be a lot more careful to aim right for the crease of your fold. That's where those holes need to be, or you're going to be less successful than you want. And you want to make sure you pierce pretty aggressively through the hole so you can really see it and get a needle through it later on. Now I'm going to go ahead and use my handy little stitching cradle and fix myself up here, doing it this way for the remaining 2 signatures. Now, if I look at my signatures all stacked together, do you see how the holes are all lined up and they're all right in the crease? That's exactly what we're looking for. So I hope you were able to recreate that. And now we have a little bit more prep to do. Now, if you're following along in the instructions, I did skip ahead a little bit. So with the piercing, I got all excited, but we're okay. We haven't gone off course too far. Now we have this green binding paper or whatever color you're working with. And I'm going to fold along the score lines that I made earlier. And remember when you do that to bury the bump of the score. Now this is a piece of folding board designed to help add a little bit of strength and stability to our spine. And we're going to glue that in place. So I'll use my trusty liquid bookbinding glue because we are binding a book. It's going to give me a nice coverage. And just with that squiggly application, and just center that right in there within the scored lines. And it should line up edge to edge on the top and bottom. Now there is a narrow template on page 5. Maybe in lieu of cutting it out, I'm going to see if I can do a little folding trick with this too. Otherwise you could cut it out. But I think all I need to be able to see is that these edges align and the top and bottom are aligned perfectly. So I'm just centering this template right on top of that spine piece. And I have about a bunch of punching to do. So again, you could use a push pin, an awl, any kind of a paper piercing tool, anything with a sharp. You could use a needle and just pierce through every hole on the template, going through the binding paper and the folding board. Okay, and now I have my stitching hole templates on my spine. That's perfect. Next, if you ordered the kit or any of the kit components, you're going to have some thread. It's a waxed cord, and it's been lovingly trimmed and wrapped around Deb's fingers so that it would ship neatly. But now we need to undo all of that, and I'm going to cut it into pieces of 4 equal lengths. Now, what's the best way to do that? Well, that's easy. I'm going to fold this in half and then fold it in half again. And take scissors. It doesn't have to be exact. And I'll just trim the loops at the end. There's just to be 3 loops to cut. Now I have this in 4 equally length pieces. 4 pieces of equal length. And then you also should have gotten a needle. This is a tapestry needle, so it doesn't have a real sharp edge that you have to worry about. And go ahead and thread that. Get your reading glasses and thread the cord onto the needle. And grab yourself a little tail. Okay, now a word of warning, attaching the first signature, which is, remember, a set of pages stitched in together, is probably the hardest. Once the first signature is in, and it's not even that hard, it's a lot easier. So what you want to always make sure of is that you're working with everything in the same direction. So I'm going to try to work right side up. This is the top because of the way the pockets are situated. You'd hate to glue in a pocket upside down. And I'm going to align, I'm going to just, maybe if you want, you can go right into the center hole with your needle and thread, the center of the signature from the inside to the outside. And I can see my needle. And then I'm going to put the needle into the center hole, the first one of the 4 that I've made, and go all the way through and pull it, and stop when you have a tail you can just hold on to with your thumb. That's really all you need, just enough to kind of hang on to it. The fact that this is waxed is really handy. Now what I need to do is from the outside, go into the top hole of my binding. Oh, and I missed. I'm looking for the top hole of my page as well. Go on that, look at that. There's my needle. Pull it in. Nice. Okay, now I'm gonna go back out the center hole. And here, what I want to avoid is going through the layers of this thread, the ply of the thread, if that makes any sense. So when I go back out through all these layers, I want to just try not to go through the thread, if that makes sense. Okay, pull that nice and tight. Now go into the same columned hole. So this is the first column at the bottom. And this is just called a pamphlet stitch. Nice, it's just so easy. This is it. I guess we're gonna want a shorter tail. Okay, so I'm gonna take my needle off the thread, and you wanna remove all of your slack. So just make sure there's no loosey-goosey threads in there. Do you see on the outside of the spine how nice and tight those threads are? That's probably the most common error that new students make when they stitch their first book. Now notice I'm just going to make a little knot like I'm tying my shoe right at that center hole. And because the thread has a waxed layer to it, I can just create like an invisible third finger by pushing down onto that knot. It holds itself in place, which is so handy. Then I just did like a square knot, and with scissors, I'll trim the tails to about 1 inch. Doesn't even have to be that long, maybe 3/4 of an inch. And my first signature is now attached to my book. Now here's my flap on the left. So I'm gonna pay attention to that and grab my next signature. I'm gonna go with the purple one and make sure my first signature is closed to me. And it gets attached the same exact way. So once again, I'll add my needle to the second thread. Keep a little tail. Go into the center hole. Now again, just be aware of your direction. Make sure everything is right side up. I'll leave a little tail in there. And now I'm gonna line this with the second column of holes and bring my needle out the corresponding hole in that column. The middle one. Okay. Then I'm going to go through the top and then through the signature as well, from the outside of that signature to the inside. Then back out the center through both layers. If you need to peek between the layers of the signature and the board, that's perfectly normal. And then back through here at the bottom. They call that the tail. So the top of the book is known as the head, and the bottom of the book is known as the tail. So I'm coming out the tail, back to the center, and remove your slack. That's like the #1 thing. Don't be a slacker. Always remove slack in the thread before you knot it, because once the knot's made, that's kind of it. And again, the convenient thing is I can tighten that knot and just use the nail of my finger to hold it in place and then trim your ends. You get to do that 2 more times. So now I've got 2 signatures attached. Take the third, rethread another piece onto my needle. Make sure you enter at the center and that the flap is again on the left and your angled pockets are facing the same direction. Go out. And then from the top, going back in. Back out the center. Down to the tail. Don't forget to take out your slack. Tie your knot. And trim the ends. And one more. Make sure you always check the direction that your flap is on the left, your envelope flap, just as a good reference point. And if you find that it's kind of challenging, you can even just set the book up and go layer by layer. So through the spine, through the envelope, through the page. Don't rush it. It'll be there for you. To there. But it's nice that you're not working with such a long piece of thread either. And it's just really good to be aware that you're not going through the plies when you go back to the center. Cool. Now that you've mastered this stitch by practicing it 4 times, you'll be happy to know that this is no different for any other book project. You can make a lot of really fun pamphlet stitched books using these skills. And what's nice about the pamphlet stitch is that the pages lay nice and flat. You're going to really like that aspect of this book. Okay, we're getting there. We've got all of our stitches in place, and look at that beautiful spine. Next, we have all of these panels still remaining that we trimmed earlier from the kit, and this is what's going to be used to decorate our book. And if now would be a really good time to install them, because it's easy to access all the pages and you can kind of get a good idea. For this, I'm just going to be using my favorite ATG gun and choose some contrasting colors to nestle the remaining panels onto the pages. I think I'm going to start by making sure the plain side of every white pocket has a mat, and then leaf in whatever colors I'm left with after that anywhere you like. And you can do that on the actual paper pages like these, and on the envelopes as well. All right, now it's starting to look like a book, but we still have to work on these covers. So I'm going to grab out of pocket C, and that's what I like about just having this organizer is everything is, you know, thought through about an order of steps, and just makes this whole process a lot easier. Now these folding board covers just simply nestle right in onto this flap. So a great way to attach this would probably be to put my adhesive in the known area. So that's the binding strip here. So I'm going to go right along the edge of that strip and along this perimeter here, that score line, and then just get that filled in. And then I can take my cover and just nestle it right next to the seam there and push that down into place. I can go on this side now that I have it and do some burnishing. And then flip it over and do the same thing on the other side. So add the other board to this side. Make sure this is attached next to the spine and not next to the page, because you want your book to be able to open and close easily. So there's like a little bit of a seam in there between the score line and the cover board. Now we have something that strongly resembles a book. Nice. Also in pocket C, there were some pieces that are perfectly designed to fit right within the area of the white folding board to just add a little bit of color. We have one for the front cover and one for the back cover, and that should center right into that spot. This other printed piece is basically the perfect size for a photo mat, so I'm just going to set that aside for now. And the last official step to completing the book before you start making it your own and decorating it is to add the closure. We just have an elastic with barbs, and so just make sure that you're looking at the back cover and grab your ruler and a pencil. Now I'm looking for a 1/2 inch from the top and 1 1/4 inches from the edge. So I'm just going to use my grid ruler here. This solid line is 1 inch from the edge, so I'm going to go 1 1/4 inches. That solid line, I'm just going to make sure my ruler's level. I'm going to go 1/2 inch down from the top and mark a little plus sign. I'm going to do the same from the bottom. So I'm still 1 1/4 inches from the left edge at the bottom, and 1/2 inch from the bottom. So from here to here is 1/2, and from here to there is 1 1/4. Then with my crocodile, I have a smaller hole that I can punch. So if you happen to have this, you're going to want to use the smaller hole. Otherwise, just whatever punch you can get your hands on is fine. And I'm going to punch at the marked location. Now, when we go in, we're going to go from the outside to the inside with that barb. We call that a barb. A little straight end there. And then just kind of separate it from the elastic. And that way, with this installed, then you know where this is going to be as far as how you decorate the front cover. You can be mindful of how this is going to work. So when the book is closed, this goes around and secures it really beautifully. Isn't that nice? Look, there you go. There you got your book. Now in your kit, you have envelopes, you have buttons, ribbons, a stencil. You can even add some stenciling to this if you like. We've got these beautiful rosettes. We've got these little mini envelopes you can use, and a dozen photo mats. And you'll notice right away that this mat will fit right on top of the one that we cut from the print earlier. So all kinds of materials you can use to decorate the book. Let me give you a tour of the finished book because, as I mentioned before, we have the 2 sheets of cut aparts. This is what really makes this project work beautifully. Once you get those pieces separated out, I even used one of the scraps from the D pile to die cut a circle for the front, and then finish it off with one of these little yellow buttercup flowers, and I attached it with our bookbinding glue. So let's just take a quick tour of my finished album here. You can see how I incorporated the goodies, all the little scraps from the D pile. I virtually had very little left. You can put photo mats into these angled pockets. So if you have any special event coming up that you can create a book for, I think it would be great for a shower. And then you could put all the cards that you received. Use some of the same practices you use when you make a scrapbook page for the book. It's going to be absolutely beautiful. Now, if this color scheme maybe doesn't speak to you, I bet we could find one that does. Here's one we just released a kit called Fun and Games. And so using the black folding board, it's slightly heavier in weight than the white. It was what was available to us. The black folding board is the substrate for this one. Using the Fun and Games kit, I even have a game spinner right in the kit, plus the little flattened bottle caps to decorate the outside, and then all the cute little charms. And then inside every pocket, you've got tons more real estate. So this just, it offers so many fun options for any kind of a junk journal, whatever kind of book you want to design. You could do it all with plain paper and paint on it. We also have a collection called Ever After, and this is more appropriate for perhaps a wedding or a baby, or again, a bridal shower. I think this would be so much fun. Well, if anything, I hope that by watching this project come together, you have the confidence that you know you can make this project along with me step by step. Just as a reminder, work at your very own pace. Use that pause button liberally and tackle it at a speed that is comfortable for you in your own workspace. If you liked the way this whole project came together with our trimming, sorting, filing, and then handling it step by step, consider a Club Scrap membership. We make pages and cards and projects together every single month, and we'd love to have you be a member of the Club Scrap family. I hope you consider joining us soon, and I'll see you next time.